I'm Dr. David Bull. I'm chairman of Reform UK. I've had a very different backstory. I'm a medical doctor by training, and I've worked for 30 years in television. I've been involved in politics really for many years, but I became a Brexit Party MEP in 2019. I was then deputy leader of the party, and now I'm really proud to say I'm chairman of the party. And so I suppose my passion for politics has always been about fairness. This is about ensuring that people get access to healthcare, that we keep the NHS free at the point of need, but at the same time actually improve the service so people get really good outcomes, and so they are better than we are currently seeing, where we are falling far behind Europe. So for me, it's all about fairness. It's about putting British people first. It's about reinvigorating this great country and putting great back into Britain. I've been on a very long political journey. In 2019, I became a Brexit Party MEP, and one of the proudest moments of my life is voting for Brexit, carrying the Union flag out of the European Parliament. We got on the Eurostar, we took the Union flag back to where it belonged. It's extraordinary to be part of political history. I've no doubt about that. There's something inside that says this is a semblant moment in British history. This is the moment when politics changed for good. I've never felt anything quite like this. I know we're on a mission. I can feel it. I can sense it whenever I go outside and talk to people. People are desperate for change. They're tired of the two-party system, and they believe that Reform UK can deliver it, and we are going to prove them right. And the next step for us is to show the public that we are ready, we are competent, we are going to form the next party of government, and we are going to smash the political system. Britain needs reform.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reform UK Scotland Conference, live from Bishopton in Renfrewshire. Please welcome the chairman of Reform UK, Dr. David Bull.
Físgar Math Alba, good afternoon, Scotland. So good to be with you. A very good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much indeed for such a fantastic reception. Let me tell you, it is so good to be back here near Glasgow, a city that featured very early on in my TV career. Now, any prizes for guessing what show that was? Are you old enough to remember? Well, I used to work here at BBC Scotland on a children's TV show called Fully Booked, if any of you remember that, with Tim Vincent, with Gail Porter, and a Highland cow called Morag. And judging by the way the SNP has run Scotland, I think Morag the cow would have done a better job running Scotland. Do you not think? Well, I'm Dr. David Bull, and as you know, I am the chairman of this great party, and I never grow tired of saying this. We are the fastest growing political party in this country, and we are still the fastest growing political party ever seen in British history, and that is quite some accolade, is it not? So let me just tell you, my chairman's tour of Britain started in June of last year, nearly 9 months ago. I looked so much younger then. And I deliberately actually chose to start the tour here in Scotland, in Perth. Such is the importance of this great country in its own right, and of course as an integral part of the great United Kingdom. Now, with its dramatic landscapes and towering mountains and vast hills and deep glens and historic cities and wild coastline, Scotland really is one of the most beautiful countries on earth. Now, I have to also admit that Scotland holds a very special place in my heart and in the hearts of my family. You won't know this. My mother grew up in Scotland. She went to school in Scotland. My father actually proposed to my mother on Arthur's Seat. Indeed, how romantic. And as children, we would spend very carefree holidays here in Scotland. And I even have my own family tartan, the Innis tartan, which I recently wore, by the way, to a burn supper with Malcolm Offord. I made a terrible mistake. I let Malcolm show me a number of very fine Scottish whiskies, and boy, did my head hurt the next day. And today I'm even wearing the Scottish Saltire socks to be in your presence. So apart from my nostalgia and rugged countryside and beautiful architecture, the question is, what has Scotland ever done for the Union and for the world? Well, rather a lot, it transpires. Scotland really has an extraordinary record of technological innovation which is far out of proportion to its size. Many inventions that have shaped the modern world were created by Scots or developed here in Scotland. For example, the steam engine, courtesy of James Watt, which powered the Industrial Revolution. Now, he was from Greenock. That is the same place where Malcolm Offord is from and where Malcolm is standing at the election. The telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell. Penicillin, discovered by a Scot, Alexander Fleming, and that, as you know, changed the face of modern medicine. The television, invented in Scotland, thanks to John Logie Baird. The decimal point, thanks to the Edinburgh mathematician who revolutionised mathematics and calculation. But is there any more? Well, the answer is yes. The safety razor, the vacuum flask, the bicycle, the Forth Bridge, shipbuilding on the Clyde, early computer science, robotics, and AI, and Dolly the sheep. So Scotland has a lot to be proud of. Now, Scotland's story, as I've laid out, is one of inspiration and success and triumph. And let me be very clear, under a future Reform UK administration, Scotland will have a fabulous future, and that is thanks to all of you and all the hard work we are doing here in Scotland. Now, you know this, but after 19 years of SNP failure, Scotland faces some very serious problems indeed. Scotland really should be a monumental powerhouse. I was looking at its onshore GDP. It was estimated to be £209 billion last year. And when you add in offshore oil and gas extraction, it climbs to a walloping £223 billion. And yet, despite such economic success, Scotland faces crises on multiple fronts. Here are the shocking statistics that the SNP want to hide from you. Scotland has the lowest life expectancy of any UK nation. That is very sobering. A significant proportion of people live in poverty in Scotland, which is unacceptable. And Scotland has one of the highest death rates from alcohol in the UK, and alcohol, of course, being a major contributor to chronic illnesses such as liver disease, cancers, and heart disease. And as a medic, I know all too well, drug deaths here in Scotland are the highest in Europe, and they have risen significantly since the SNP came to power. Half of all Scottish adults have at least one long-term health condition, and there is also an epidemic of obesity. 32% of Scottish people are obese, and that is the highest level ever recorded. 66% of Scottish adults are overweight. And this is despite the Scottish government talking tough and having a goal of halving childhood obesity by 2030. But the progress by this government has been woefully slow. And the people paying that price are the Scottish people. And that has to end now. Now, on top of this, the Scottish education system is failing kids. There has been a decline in reading in maths and science across the board. When you look at the NHS, 1 in 6 Scots is stuck on an NHS waiting list. When I was reading these figures, I was absolutely amazed. 5,000 people have been waiting more than 2 years in Scotland. That is the highest ever recorded. And when you look at the benefits bill in Scotland, it will be over £2 billion in deficit by 2030. You also know this. Infrastructure projects have been hugely delayed, and they have been wildly over budget. And I think the best example of this is the inability of the SNP to build new ferries for Scotland's island communities. Now, when you sit and talk to Scottish people about the top 3 issues and what they are in this country, the cost of living and the economy comes top, closely followed by immigration, and then health. Now, all of these issues come down to appalling management from Holyrood and from Westminster. And I don't say this lightly, but I think the current government in Westminster is the worst that any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. And let's face it, that is a pretty low bar, is it not? This government is directionless, it's rudderless, it's devoid of principles and policies and lacks any kind of coherence. And I've been thinking about this a great deal as I've been touring the great United Kingdom. You see, the problem is that great countries need a great leader. What do we have? Keir Starmer. Yeah, a failed human rights lawyer who prefers Davos to Devon. This is a man, ladies and gentlemen, who has alienated almost the entire British electorate. If you look at the latest polling, he languishes with a net approval rating of -47. In fact, his approval rating is so bad that at this point, the taxman, rail replacement bus services, and even the Glasgow Rush Hour are more popular than our current Prime Minister. Now, let's be really clear here. The Westminster parties, I think it's fair to say, have consistently and constantly destroyed people's hopes, their aspirations, and their futures. I just want to highlight this and look at them in turn. There is no doubt that given its woeful performance, the Labour government down in Westminster is out of ideas, it's out of time, and I think you will agree it's time it should be booted out of office. You see, the problem is the Labour government has absolutely no idea what it is doing. And astonishingly, it is extraordinary. They're now on their 16th U-turn. They've trashed the economy. They've kicked businesses where it hurts. They've also launched full frontal attacks on our farmers here in Scotland. Farming is the lifeblood of much of Scotland, with approximately 45,000 farms in Scotland. Now, these holdings cover roughly 5 million hectares. That represents about 65% of Scotland's total land area. But the Westminster politicians, they're either ignorant or they don't care. And if that wasn't bad enough, Labour is destroying the very best of Scotland. They have presided over rocketing energy costs. They are worshipping on the altar of net zero. Now, they had a choice. They could have made Scotland a global gas and oil superpower, but instead they chose to rely on intermittent renewables. And then, of course, the complete farce over the winter fuel allowance has hit pensioners very hard, which I find is utterly unacceptable. But Labour in Westminster doesn't seem to care. Now, the winter fuel payment in Scotland has now been replaced by the pension age winter heating payment, which is a devolved benefit. But, of course, due to UK government cuts, this payment is no longer universal, and many pensioners are missing out on much needed money. And I put it to you that all of this is totally unacceptable. It is utter madness. Now, unforgivably, the Labour government has also allowed the illegal invasion of our country to continue unabated. When you look at these figures, 41,000 people came here illegally last year. That is the second highest number of crossings ever recorded. And if you remember, Labour promised they would get on top of this. The truth is, Labour prioritises illegal foreign migrants over Scottish citizens, and this must stop once and for all. I want to be really clear and honest with you this afternoon. I pledge to all of you this afternoon, only a Reform UK government will stop your country being invaded once and for all by illegal migrants. Now, Labour and the SNP are resorting to desperate tactics because they know they are in trouble. They keep turning to us and accusing Reform UK of wanting to privatise the NHS. You've heard it, haven't you? Repeatedly. Well, I'm a medical doctor. I'm also the person who wrote our health policy. And I want to be really clear with you. This is a blatant lie. Under a Reform UK administration in Scotland, the NHS will continue to remain free at the point of need, and that is what the Scottish people want. But Labour and the SNP aren't the only liars in town, are they? It was the Tories that betrayed your trust. The Tories broke Britain. You know that. I know that. We know that. And the message across Scotland and the rest of the UK is clear, and it is very direct. And I put this to you as well. Despite what they say, you can never trust the Tories again. So given the two main parties have abjectly failed Scotland and the UK, some people are turning to Ed Davey. Quite. And of course the Lib Dems in desperation, and that is what I call absolutely desperate. And then that leaves the Green Party. I should stop here, maybe. That leaves the Green Party. I want to be really clear with you this afternoon as well. The Green Party is a major threat to Scottish and British national security. They are more interested in Gaza than in Great Britain, and Scotland simply cannot afford to vote Green. You see, I think the stakes are incredibly high. And I say that as someone who's been involved in politics for quite a while. I believe this is the last chance saloon for Scotland, and actually for the United Kingdom. I believe passionately that Reform UK is the only choice to turn things around once and for all. And people around the United Kingdom can see this. We are now the fastest growing political party in this country. We are now the largest political party in this country. And since I've been chairman, we have gained 5,000 new members every single month of my tenure, which is pretty extraordinary. We also took on the government, and we won a seismic victory against the government who tried to cancel elections for 4.5 million people across the United Kingdom. It was wrong. It was undemocratic, and thanks to the fight mounted by Reform UK, that wrong has been put right, and that means that 4.5 million people will now have the chance to vote, and that is the right thing to do. We now have 8 members of Parliament. I keep counting them every single week in my meetings with the members of Parliament, and we are not stopping there. Reform UK is well and truly on the rise. Let's be very clear about that. And here in Scotland, thanks to the extraordinary work of someone who works incredibly hard, our National Director Martin Green, and of course our members and supporters, I can tell you the latest polling now shows us in Scotland at 20%. That puts us in second place in Scotland, and that is utterly extraordinary. Would you not agree? So we now have, here in Scotland, 24 Reform UK councillors in Scotland. We have 1 Reform UK member of the Scottish Parliament in Graham Simpson. And we now have over 12,500 members in Scotland, and we are only just getting started. Now, the Scottish parliamentary elections are in 49 days' time, I'm counting, on the 7th of May. And that is when people across Scotland will elect 129 members to the Scottish Parliament. My message to all of you here today is direct, and it's really honest. Now is the time that we have to fight for the Scottish people, for Scotland, and for the Union. This is the moment when we have to come together, we have to work together, we have to campaign together, and we will fight for a new Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time that Scotland roars again, and you can make that happen. Well, our first speaker today is a qualified teacher, a business owner, and a Reform UK Scotland candidate for the 2026 Holyrood elections. Her Scottish roots run deep, Her family has lived in East Lothian for more than 80 years and has continued to be a strong part of the local community. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Angela Ross.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Ross, and I am one of the 73 potential constituency candidates for Reform UK Scotland, standing in the May 2026 Holyrood elections. For nearly 2 decades, Scotland has been held back by a devolved government in Holyrood that clings hold of power, refusing to give it to the people, by a political class intent on protecting the status quo, and by a system that gaslights us, lowering our expectations and delivering less with every passing year. We've seen ferries left unfinished in shipyards, hospital waiting lists spiralling out of control, and schools slipping down the ranks, and a stagnant economy caught in a doom loop. Public spending far outweighs funding in an impossible, illogical mess that will only get worse as time goes on. We're told to accept delay. We're told to accept decline, and we are told to accept excuse after excuse and to believe that independence from the union will somehow magically make everything okay. While our short-sighted, incompetent government in Holyrood fixates on this goal, the people of this country struggle, and our nation keeps falling further behind. When 1 in 4 school children from deprived communities leave school without the expected literacy and numeracy levels, when 1 in 10 young Scots cannot find work, and when 1/3 of Scottish households are now in fuel poverty, 1 in 5 prioritise another family member at mealtime because there's simply not enough food to go round, and 1 in 10 skip meals altogether due to the cost of food. When half of all adults in Scotland have at least one long-term health condition, as we heard from David, and when life expectancy is no longer rising, I ask you, when is enough enough? The SNP government has taken our saltire cross from us and continues to hit us over the head with it, helping itself to the money in our pocket. And we've let it. Scotland is broken. Our beautiful Scotland. We're not a nation of people that just give up. We are strong. We are brave. We are a party of real people. We are doctors, nurses, teachers, business owners, engineers, electricians, plumbers, and we're ready to make a change and make a difference and to take our country back. We are Reform UK Scotland. Let us unite as a nation of makers, thinkers and doers, and build a Scotland where enterprise thrives, communities prosper, and government serves with the clarity, the integrity, and the common sense that our Enlightenment tradition demands. We will grow the economy together, building trust between the government and the people, backing local ambition, and creating conditions for businesses and people to succeed and to thrive. Our approach is simple. Restore competence to government. End this obsession with constitutional theatre and focus on delivery. We want better schools, We want a stronger NHS and a pro-growth economy that raises living standards for every single family. We will decentralise power, cut back the central bureaucracy and return responsibility to local communities. This is the Scotland that Adam Smith imagined, a country where prosperity is built from the ground up, where government enables rather than controls, and wealth is used to create a healthier, better educated, more confident nation. Together, we can build that strong, prosperous nation, a Scotland that we can all be proud of again. Thank you.
Super stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Well, our next speaker was first elected as a Conservative councillor in 2017 for the East End of Glasgow. That was a win, by the way, that Laura Koonsberg, who I know very well, she said bookies wouldn't even take bets on. He was then re-elected in 2022 before joining Reform UK in January of last year. Now, since he saw the light and came over to us, he has represented our party on debate night, on question time. He's travelled all over the country supporting our candidates in by-elections. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councillor Thomas Kerr.
Thank you, David, for that very kind introduction. And on behalf of everyone in this room, can I thank you for your friendship and support for the Scottish Party since you became Chairman of Reform. You've been a constant presence north of the border since your appointment, and I know I speak on behalf of all of us in this hall when I want to say thank you for that. Friends, when I addressed you all a few months ago in Grangemouth, I said the political establishment were bricking it. Now, I don't know about you, but that feeling is even larger with our political opponents now in open freefall. Swinney is terrified of Flynn, Salwar apparently wants Starmer to go, and poor Russell Finlay, well, he's just wondering who he is and why he's still here. Now, today, while they talk to themselves once again in the concrete dungeon of Holyrood, we at Reform once again change the dial and become the first major party to release our fully costed manifesto as we head into these crucial Scottish parliamentary elections. But it's not just our policies that have them panicking. It's our passion, optimism, hope, which is resonating across Scotland in those forgotten working class communities for whom Reform isn't just a political party, it's people's last hope for real fundamental change. We offer a chance to balance the scales away from the cosy consensus in Holyrood and build towards what truly matters to the people. And as I said in Grangemouth, it's those very people who got me into politics to begin with. I've spent my entire career fighting for the people who have been left behind and forgotten, the communities that I am proud to call my home. I remember growing up as a child in working class Glasgow, a child who's seen firsthand the effects of addiction with both my parents, and a child who witnessed things that some portray in television, but for me and my community in Cranhill, it was real life. Now, as I stated before, I was lucky. I had two hard-working and inspiring grandparents who built me up and made me who I am, who always worked hard and played by the rules to provide for their family, who put everything on the line for us, but because of their postcode were forgotten by politicians. Now, despite that loving home, I remember seeing devastation that arrogant politicians had caused in communities like mine, where addiction was normal and social mobility was a dream, not a reality. And just a few weeks ago, while I was campaigning, I visited another community that I remember fondly as a child, but one that has been left behind by the political class too, and that's Drungen in East Ayrshire. That community provided me with respite when times got tough in the city. Every summer, I'd spend weeks upon weeks in this quiet little former mining Ayrshire village where my family lived. For me, it was heaven. For many of you, I suspect especially the press, you probably never heard it. But going back a few weeks ago, I seen just how much the political establishment have ignored them. Just how much, if not more, than my community in Shettleston. These people, my people, well, they're the salt of the earth and the true backbone of Scotland. They get up early, go to work, provide for their families, yet at the end of the month, John Swinney, Keir Starmer, and their rotten government spit in their face and rob them blind. Well, let me say to Drungen, Shettleston, and every other forgotten working class community across this country, that ends now. Reform is on your side, not because of politics, but because of passion. Because to us, these communities aren't examples in some sociology textbooks. For us in this room, these communities are home. And that's why we are part of this movement. You see, our opponents want us to believe this is as good as it gets, but it's not. Scotland can do better. Much, much better. And after almost 2 decades of nationalist rule, what has John Swinney and this rotten SNP government got to show for it? Just look at their conference last weekend, and you'll see a tired party that's limping on like some sort of 1980s, band that hasn't learned to put up the greatest hits album. Free prescriptions, free university, free bus travel, free delusion. We in Reform won't shy away from saying what needs to be said, and that is that none of this stuff is free, folks. Zilch. You and I pay for every one of these so-called benefits in our taxes, and what do we get for it? We get a couple of paracetamol for the doctor, but waiting lists are at record levels, with pensioners using their life savings to get in the operation. Or an education system tailored towards university, giving our young people pointless degrees, but slashing funding to our college sectors and apprenticeships, leaving a generation of Scotland's young people on the dole. Friends, the cynic in me says it's a plan. They want to keep the working class in their place, throw them some scraps, and beg for the votes under the illusion of freebies. Well, First Minister, Scotland ain't buying it. Your tax-obsessed government has run Scotland into the ground, and we are here to fix it. That's why, under Malcolm Offer's bold leadership, Reform Scotland is going into this election with a pledge not just to match the rest of the UK, but to beat it. Because as a proud patriot, I don't want Scotland just to beat the English at the football. I want us to beat them at economic growth and competitiveness. After all, there's nothing wrong with a bit of friendly rivalry. Our tax plans announced earlier this year changed the dial in Scottish politics. It's no longer about realignment with the UK, it's about making Scotland the most prosperous part of our nation. And that isn't important just in terms of numbers and economic growth charts. It matters because it affects people's daily lives. The people who are struggling to make ends meet, those who are in work but in poverty. And take it from me, the best route out of poverty isn't a handout as the SNP, Labour and Tories believe, it's a hand up. For us in Reform, we do not... For us in Reform, we don't pull the ladder up behind us, we keep it there for others to climb up, and that's why cutting tax matters. We trust you to look after your family way more than Starmer or Swinney. For every tax cut we make, that's more money in your pockets and more jobs that could be created. That's an entrepreneur who could be unlocked, a developer willing to invest and build homes, and a workie that could be employed. So conference, let's be bold and unleash Scotland's entrepreneurial spirit, a spirit that this nation was built on. Now, the manifesto that's launched today will show action over rhetoric and leadership over spin. Scotland is broken and Reform are here to fix it. Now, friends, nowhere symbolises the demise of Scotland under the current political establishment more than a few miles down the road from here, my home city of Glasgow. Now, do we all know the phrase, let Glasgow flourish? Well, tell me, how can my city flourish when the political establishment, both Labour and SNP, have riddled it with waste? When I grew up in Cranhill, we faced challenges, yes, but we had a great sense of community, and everyone looked out for one another. Heck, if it wasn't for Cranhill Parish Church and their Sunday school, I may not even be here today. But nowadays, that simply isn't the case. Instead, many now feel they live in a city with strangers. Under successive SNP and Labour politicians, we have seen social cohesion break down, with illegal migrants being prioritised over Scots. That's wrong, and it must end. Glasgow is now the UK's asylum capital, with a recent report showing it can take families up to 100 years. Yes, 100 years to get a socially rented home with 3 bedrooms or more in the city. And the commentariat wonder why our birth rates are so low. That is scandalous. But let me be blunt. Do any of you think that would be the case for the one of those 20 refugees per week who have flocked to our city? What about the literally thousands of illegal migrants who have come to Glasgow simply because Labour and Tory governments have branded us a dispersal city? Now, the answer to both those questions is no. Yet we wonder why so many Glaswegians feel strangers are being prioritised over them. Glasgow is at breaking point. Enough is enough. Just look at the figures released this week related to drug deaths. In Scotland, we saw an 8% rise in these figures, but in Glasgow, that was the highest of any area in Scotland. Now, these deaths aren't just statistics, because behind every one of them is a grieving family and a life lost. And you can take that from me personally, because in 2016, Scotland recorded 867 drug deaths, and in those figures was my father. Back then, that was a record, but the latest figures show that numbers has increased to 1,146. Now, I have spoken openly about this issue for years, because for me, I'm not unusual. For many kids growing up in my communities like mine in Glasgow, this is just the norm. But what was the SNP's answer? A safe consumption room that has referred nobody to rehab and led to a literal needle tree just yards away from it, where we heard just last weekend a person died. Now, I made a pledge personally that I would never let another child go through that pain that I did, and that's why I'll always speak loudly on this issue. But it's not just drugs. Glasgow streets are now unsafe, with a significant rise in sexual crimes, including rapes, hitting a new high. In 2025-26 alone, Glasgow's seen 137 rapes reported and 197 sexual assaults. That's a 34% increase in a year. And what was our SNP council's response to these figures? Well, Councillor Paul McCabe, who chairs the city's SAFE group, called it unfortunate. Conference, you tell me if Councillor McCabe's description fits these incidents. Do you think it was unfortunate when a 32-year-old pregnant army veteran was sexually assaulted at her home by a delivery driver who was a migrant? Do you think it was unfortunate that a young 13-year-old boy was brutally attacked by a gang of thugs outside his school in Bellahouston Academy simply because he was white? Or was it unfortunate that just this week a police officer was injured in a fight at St Enoch Centre where a knife was found and two teens were charged? Or do you think it was unfortunate when a 21-year-old girl was followed home and sexually assaulted after her birthday night out by a Syrian refugee? A Syrian refugee that we have found out just yesterday has been sentenced to just 8 years behind bars at our expense. That is a Syrian refugee, one of the Syrian refugees, who Nicola Sturgeon personally said she would welcome to this country and would take into her home. But none ended up there. Instead, they flooded our streets. Conference, the only way to deal with scumbags like that is deportations, and that will happen under Nigel Farage. Now, I could go on, folks. The stories are endless and they are heartbreaking. But these aren't unfortunate. They are an absolute disgrace, a sign of anarchy in Scotland's largest city that is now lawless under the SNP's watch. A city that I, as a father, am genuinely scared to bring my child up in. Malcolm was asked a few weeks ago by the press, is Glasgow safe? Well, as a Glaswegian, it pains me to say no. No, it's not safe. Glasgow is broken and Reform are here to fix it. And I genuinely believe we in this room are the last hope to fix our country, and only with Nigel in number 10 do I feel hopeful for the future. In Conference, that is why the political establishment and the media bubble are bricking it. Because before we came along, who spoke up on these issues? The Tories, the Greens, the Lib Dems. They are non-existent losers who are squabbling over staying relevant. And what about Anas Sarwar and Labour? I mean, the best that lot can come up with is to ask us all to hold your nose and vote for them. You know, well, Anas, thanks, but no thanks. Scotland doesn't need a weak, irritable, silver spoon chancellor to fix our problems. We need action. Reform will never ask voters to hold their nose and vote for us. No, we are proud Scottish patriots. Our message is much more optimistic. Reform is asking Scots to hold their heads high as they enter that voting booth and be proud to vote for something different and something hopeful. And that is what we in this room are all about, hope. So, let me ask you all a question. Are you ready for change? Yes! Because we need you. We need every single one of you in this hall. Malcolm, Nigel, myself, and all of our candidates who will be announced today are ready for battle. But we need the People's Army behind us as we take the fight to the political establishment. Reform isn't here to play friendly. We're not here to become part of the cosy consensus in Holyrood. We are here to rip it apart. And in order for us to do that, Conference, we need you to get out over the next 49 days. We need you to deliver those leaflets and knock on those doors in every village, town and city across Scotland. Help us man the barricades as we take on a mighty, powerful cabal who have had it too easy for too long. Now, mark my words, they'll throw everything at us, but united we can, in a conference we must succeed. Scotland doesn't need another term of woke virtue signalling from a knackered political class. It needs change, delivery and reform. We mean business, so join me in rejecting the Chancellors and give us a chance to get Scotland moving forward. Only reform will put Scotland first. So conference, let's get out there and win. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Thomas. Well, I mentioned at the beginning of today's event how important Scotland really is to the family of Reform UK. And thanks to the enterprising and out-of-the-box thinking by Martin Green, Scotland's National Director, of course, I'm delighted to announce an update to our very own Reform UK Scotland tartan. It's better than that. Our own tartan. Yes. Now, the great news is we are now producing scarves, hats, trews, and even kilts for our members, and they will be available to buy from next month. Now, personally, I can't wait to address our next Scottish meeting in full Scottish dress, and I'm a true Scotsman, by the way. Now, our next speaker grew up in the far north of Scotland. She qualified in Edinburgh as a veterinary surgeon, but after having children, campaigned at the Scottish Parliament seeking to improve treatment and support for people with ME. She's also campaigned on environmental matters, fighting to have a secure energy supply and highlighting the impacts of the net zero targets on industry and the cost of living. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Helen McDade.
Good afternoon, conference. I'm delighted to be here, and you may be wondering who I am and why I'm here. So I'd just like to say a few things about that. First of all, I'd like to say, a few years ago when Reform UK Scotland started, who would have thought we'd be polling at 20%? Well, there are some people here today and elsewhere who did think that, and some of them are here, and we should thank them, because without them, without their huge amount of hard work, very little sleep, a bit grumpy sometimes, but their belief in a better country, we wouldn't be where we are now. So what brought me to this point? Well, I hate to disappoint the media, nice to see them here, but I wasn't ever in the Conservative Party. In fact, I haven't been in a political party since the 1990s. And like many in Scotland, I couldn't find a party that I wanted to vote for, let alone join, for many years. But I have been involved in politics. I lobbied on key health and environment issues and energy issues, both voluntarily and a paid capacity. So I'm very familiar with the workings and machinations of the Scottish Parliament. Indeed, I stood as a non-party candidate in the Scottish Parliament elections in 2003 on a Save Local Hospitals ticket. Something, sadly, didn't go very far, and despite the efforts of individuals within the NHS, as we've heard, it has got worse, not better. And that is, as we know, one of the top concerns for Scots, along with the cost of living, is the crisis in the NHS. Although I see Mr. Swinney, Honest John, tells us that our NHS is getting better, so it's a relief. Mr. Swinney also tells us that independence will be a big issue, but the truth is, it's low on people's priorities now. And also disappointingly to the media, I didn't vote for independence in 2014. But I appreciate friends and supporters of Reform who did and who have joined us. Reform welcomes people from all backgrounds as long as we're all committed to our key values, nurturing families, cohesive communities, and saving our country. I did campaign for Brexit. it's worth remembering over 1 million Scots voted for Brexit, far more than voted for the SNP at the general election in 24. And I also remember a lively European Parliament meeting when Nigel Farage spoke in Edinburgh in 2019, before the elections that we last took part in. And in those elections, the Brexit Party achieved the most votes, completely against the political establishment. And we should remember that it is worth trying to, against the political establishment, and as has been said, look at the way we're going so far. One of the critical Scottish Parliament issues which we can take action on as soon as we get in is about management of our land. It's already been mentioned that farmers drowning in red tape, not enough money to live on. We need to support them and ensure that they can grow our food. But we also, and I'm delighted that we have many members who are farmers. We get a lot of support from them because they know we're the only ones who mean it when we say we'll do something to help you. But we also need to protect our best natural landscapes and our seas. I have been appalled to see increasingly unachievable Scottish and UK government net zero targets, which are used as an excuse to allow unthinkable planning decisions and which make opposition to renewable energy developments almost impossible. On this issue, the Scottish planning system is entirely broken, and that's deliberate. For instance, a councillor who dares to say that perhaps there are enough renewable developments in this particular area of the Highlands, or Ayrshire, or Fife, will be banned from taking part in the decision-making process. The people who are elected to represent their communities, it doesn't matter what their community thinks, they will be told to remove themselves from the discussion. This happens regularly. Unsurprisingly, then no one votes to oppose even the most damaging developments. This is not democracy, and this has to stop. And it's been referred earlier about how we must decentralise from the very centralised Scottish Government. Recently, one of these examples, Scottish Government has recently approved Berwick Bank, which would be the largest offshore wind farm in Europe. 307 turbines, 355 metres high. It's unimaginable. However, to help you, it says it would cover an area 4 times the size of Edinburgh, an area of our seas 4 times the size of Edinburgh, and it surrounds the Bass Rock, which some of you may know is the home to the world's largest northern gannet colony, currently about 50,000. However, it's okay. The development will have a detailed seabird compensation plan due to concerns about the potential mortality of tens of thousands of birds. You wonder how you might compensate for taking up an area of sea 4 times the size of Edinburgh. But it's okay, because Scottish and Southern Energy have a suggestion, and it is that restrictions be put on sand eel fishing to help the sand eels. So SSE get the profits and our fishermen lose even more of their livelihoods. This must not happen, and we must support our fishermen as well. We don't need Berwick Bank, but we need Rosebank. We need to get our own oil and gas out of the ground as fast as possible. And I wrote that before this morning's news, and it's just so blindingly obvious, you wonder how on earth people can't see this. So the day I decided to stop shouting at the telly and get out and do something was in 2023, when Richard Tice said that Reform would halt the net zero agenda. It was a brave thing to say at that time, not knowing whether it would be popular, but it was the right thing. And as it turned out, many ordinary people recognise that they are being conned and fleeced by net zero agenda. This is a key vote winner for us in Scotland. Once we explain in terms of people's jobs, their electricity bills, and the impact of low emission zones on businesses, and nearly 400 taxi drivers lost their jobs and livelihoods when the low emission zone was brought into Glasgow. People down south often don't realise that in Scotland it's a bit different. Down south, I think it's a bit like paying a parking charge in some areas, the ones I've been in. In Scotland, if you go into a low emission zone with a dirty, old, cheap car, it's 60 quid. You might not know you're in a low emission zone because, hey, it's not very obvious. They make sure you're in it before you know it. But if you go in again, it's 120 quid. It's as if you've committed a crime. And of course, the people who are most affected are businesses, are carers who can't afford to live in cities. This is ridiculous, and we must stop the low emission zones. So what I realised was that if asked by future generations, what did you do to try and save our country? I want to be able to say, I did my best. We're going to make Scotland a better country. Please do your best and support all the candidates and do as much as you can. And thank you for your support so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very strong, very powerful, and very passionate. Now, our next speaker was born in Aberdeen and has lived in East Kilbride for over 30 years. Now, before he entered politics, he was a journalist for over 30 years, working at the Scottish Sun and the Daily Record. His political career, however, began in 2007 when he was elected as a councillor for East Kilbride West. He was then elected as a Scottish Conservative MSP for Central Scotland. Then, in August of last year, he defected to Reform UK, becoming the party's sole MSP in the Scottish Parliament, and today he is now leading on policy for reform in Scotland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Graham Simpson, MSP.
Well, thank you, David, for that introduction. I must say, when David was going on about the obesity crisis, I did feel a little bit self-conscious. But I have to... my guess is over the next few weeks that will be going down as I get a bit more exercise. It's a real pleasure to speak to you again, following on from my last appearance at a huge reform event. Aren't they all? That was in Falkirk. That was slightly overshadowed by a certain big-name defection. But aren't we lucky to have Malcolm Offord as our leader in Scotland? And I'm looking forward to joining him and many others when the newbies all report for duty in the Scottish Parliament on Monday, May the 11th. Now, so far, I'm the only Reform MSP. And while it's been a pleasure being your sole representative, I could do with some friends. I would say that generally, not just politically. Today, we're going to unveil our candidates for the election on May the 7th. They're a great bunch with real-world experience. And I hope I'll be there to help and guide them as they learn the ropes of what it is to be an MSP. First of all, it's an honour. When they get sworn in on May the 14th, it will be the proudest day of their lives. The real work for reform starts then, and our task is to show that we're the party of the people, that we're on their side, and that by backing us, you will get real reform. Now, the Scottish Parliament has to change. This week, we've seen it at its worst, showing its inability to organise properly, with 8 bills being rushed through between this week and next. That's not how to do legislation properly. On Tuesday, I had one of the toughest decisions that I've had to make as an MSP, and that was whether to back the bill on assisted dying. There will be different views in this hall, as there were different, very sincerely held opinions in Parliament and society. In the end, I voted against the bill, but it was not an easy decision. This came after some marathon voting sessions, which again are not how to do legislation properly. And as you know, the bill did not pass. It was a members' bill. I had my own members' bill this session, which would have compelled MSPs to occasionally turn up to Parliament, honestly, and would have introduced a power of recall so voters could get rid of MSPs who flout the rules. I knew that when I came over to Reform last August, that other parties could punish me by rejecting this bill. I hoped that would not happen, but it did happen. MSPs voted to protect themselves, and that's a disgrace. In fact, in recent days, the Senate in Wales has passed a recall bill. We're outliers in Scotland. But it's not the end of the story, because if I'm re-elected on May the 7th, I'll bring this bill back, and we will get recall done. Now, I knew when I joined Reform that it was the right thing to do, and I'm so glad that I did, because we stand on the brink of pulling off something very special in May. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, but there's every chance that we could be the main opposition or even in government. I've always thought that's possible. And I've said from the moment I joined that we need to get rid of the SNP and their divisive constitutional obsession, and that we need a recovery government focused on improving the public services that the Nationalists have failed. Our manifesto is very clearly aimed at turning Scotland around after nearly 20 years of SNP inertia. For more than 2 decades, we've had high spending and declining outcomes under successive governments. And despite record budgets, working families face rising costs, failing public services and stagnant growth. Reform UK offers a bold alternative, a plan to cut waste, lower taxes, boost private enterprise and restore world-class healthcare, education and infrastructure. And our mission is really quite simple. Deliver prosperity, fairness and opportunity for every Scot. We're going to concentrate on the things that matter to folk, like health. Scotland's health service is creaking at the seams under the SNP. The country can't afford to have another 5 years of SNP government. People struggle to see their GP. Our hospitals are full. Delayed discharges have not been tackled, which means patients are stuck on wards when they're well enough to leave. The knock-on effect is that ambulances can't drop off patients, which means people wait for ambulances. The whole system is a mess. Health boards have needed to be bailed out. It can't go on. Or take transport. Good transport in all its forms is vital in urban and rural Scotland, but too often under the SNP it does not work as it should. The number of recorded roadworks in Scotland is now 28% higher than it was before the COVID pandemic. You probably know that if you've driven here. Reform wants a transport system that serves everyone and recognises that people need to get around by different means, be it by road, rail, air or sea, or under their own steam. Scotland's police are at a crisis point after a decade of austerity, centralisation and reduced local presence. Officer numbers have fallen, response times have lengthened and public confidence has eroded. Policing must serve the public, not political agendas, bureaucracy or ideology. But we've got to support our police because they're there for us, and I want you all to go and speak to the Police Federation at the back of the hall when we finish here today, because they're there to help us, and we cannot blame the men and women who are on the beat. It's not their fault. And if you get a chance, there's a video they can show you which shows real-life policing in action, and it's quite stark, and it shows you what they're up against. Now, we'll use Holyrood's full powers to restore a policing model that's visible, locally accountable, and properly resourced, ensuring officers are equipped, valued, and that's really important, and supported to deliver safety and trust across Scotland. Then, we need to value them. We're also in a housing emergency. The Scottish Government have failed to build enough new homes, preventing a generation of young people from securing their independence, starting families, and remaining in the same communities as their families and friends. Scotland's got the highest levels of homelessness since records began, with over 10,000 children living in temporary accommodation. So we need more homes, and we need to prioritise homes for local people, as Thomas Kerr said earlier. These are just some of the basics that we want to fix. So, do you want to see a strong reform group in Holyrood?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, you do. Well, that's good. I thought you might. Well, we're not going to elect ourselves. We're going to need all your help over the next 7 weeks. So we all need to pull together to do this. You can't just leave it up to me and the other candidates. So give us all that you've got, all that you have, and together we can deliver a result that can change Scotland for the better. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 30-minute break, but do not fear. After the break, we've got the wonderful Sarah Pochin, Member of Parliament, sitting down in front of me here. We've got Malcolm Offord, of course, the leader of Reform UK Scotland, and we have the leader of Reform UK as well, Nigel Farage. We'll take a break. We'll get back here at 10 to 2. Enjoy something to eat or drink, or indeed use the facility. See you at 10 to 2. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here at Reform UK, we pride ourselves on ensuring that we pick the best and the brightest to represent the British people at local, at mayoral and at parliamentary level. Now, our next speaker is one of our female MPs. I like to call her the First Lady of Reform. She likes me to call her ma'am. Yeah, it's absolutely true. She proves that fighting for every single voter at elections pays off. She won that by-election in Runcorn and Helsby by just 6 votes. That is extraordinary. Before we meet her, let's see her story.
It's been such a privilege to have been elected as the Reform Member of Parliament for Runcorn and Helsby. And I will spend the next 4.5 years working as hard as I can to make sure all of the constituents, no matter how they voted, have improvements in their lives. Whatever it is that they need help with, I am there. The reason I joined Reform was because Reform stands for everything that I believe in, and that is family values, it is community values, and it is, of course, being so proud in this great country of ours. And I believe we should be able to shout loudly about that, to fly our Union Jacks. Only a Reform government will reclaim sovereignty for this country, will reclaim control over our borders. Only a Reform government will take back some of the power that our judicial system has. It's become politicised. Only a Reform government will restore our own energy supplies, making costs to businesses lower. These are all the things that people need to get more money in their pocket, for businesses to flourish, for the economy to be strong. These policies are all going to be in our manifesto, but this is the next step towards becoming the next government of the United Kingdom.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sarah Pochin, MP.
for that lovely welcome. And Dr. David jokes, he calls me Mum, while Lee Anderson calls me the Duchess, so there you go. But I do his ironing for him, so I think that's the only reason he calls me that. But it's just wonderful to be here today. It's such an honour to be here. And every single day that I have been in this job, I pinch myself with the privileged position that I was voted into. And we laugh about the 6 votes. Everyone claims the 6 votes. In fact, I think several of you this morning have said they were your votes. But the fact is we've overturned a 15,000 Labour majority. And we will do it everywhere around the country. Now, I had so much support from Team Scotland to win that by-election, and that's why I wanted very much to come up and be part of this conference today. Oh, my auto cue's frozen. And do you know what? The funny thing is about my auto cue freezing is my Chief of Staff and David Ball will go into a complete panic, because once I start to ad-lib, the press have a field day. So... In fact, we were talking about the reform tartan then, weren't we, whilst I'm just waiting for my auto cue. And I really wanted to come on in a reform tartan burqa, but it apparently I just wasn't allowed. Do you know what? One day, let's have one of these events that aren't live streamed, and we'll do it. We'll do all the naughty stuff, we'll do all the bits that have gone wrong, and all the effing and jeffing when we do our pieces to camera and all the rest. It'd be hilarious. Anyway, right, my speech is back, so come on, let's get on with the serious stuff. But Reform UK here, north of the border, and under the leadership of Lord Offord, who, by the way, was great company last night. We had a beer and a curry, and it was fab. Because I forgot to tell you this bit as well. I'm sorry, auto cue lady. I'll get back a chat. But I had a nightmare getting here. I'm absolutely convinced that Sadiq Khan did not want me to leave London. And either that or the SNP didn't want me to arrive in Glasgow, because I got to the airport. I was virtually strip searched twice. They emptied my bags. They were emptying every piece of makeup. They knew who I was. And I'm not joking. We will be up against that. We can laugh about this. But they wanted to get me to react. They were dreadful at London City Airport. But we're going to face 3 years of this. It's intimidation. They want us to break. We will not break because we're strong. So I stood there and took it. But Reform UK up here in Scotland, under the leadership of Lord Offord and Martin Green, is a force to be reckoned with. And I have no doubt we will get more MPs in the north, as well as everywhere else across the UK, beginning with more members of Parliament in the Scottish Parliament in only 49 days' time, was it, I was told. But the People's Army in England, Wales, and definitely in Scotland is on the move. Up and down the country, decent, hard-working people that we call Alarm Clock Britain, who pay their taxes, have just had enough. And here in Scotland, like everywhere else in the United Kingdom, you are fed up with what has gone before. You have been failed in Scotland by the Labour Party and the SNP, and you deserve better. And a Scottish Reform government will make things better. We have news for the SNP. The People's Army is on the move and it's marching towards Holyrood. Yeah, we are. Because there's so much to fix here in Scotland, so much that has been neglected. Let me tell you what a Reform government will do for Scotland and do to improve everyday lives of the Scottish people. We're going to restore law and order to your streets, and I very much hope that the whole area of law and order will be something that I will be looking after, and believe me, I'll be taking no prisoners. But joking aside, as we heard earlier from the excellent speakers this morning, sexual assault is at a record high in Scotland, with a reported 16,000 cases in 2025, and rape has increased by 12% last year alone. 1,000 prisoners were released early onto our streets here in Scotland. Shoplifting surged to a record high in 2025, with over 50,000 cases recorded, whilst the SNP cut the number of police officers in Scotland by 1,000 since 2020. Reform will put police back on Scottish streets. Reform will stop the early release of prisoners, and there will be no legalising of drugs, of heroin, under a Reform government. And what of immigration? Scotland has taken nearly 500,000 migrants in the last 20 years. Last year, there were reported 6,350 asylum seekers in Scotland. Glasgow Council is forecast to spend £66 million of your money in 2026, this year, on housing asylum seekers. Reform will detain, deport all illegal immigrants in Scotland. Make no mistake, under Zia Youssef and to people like myself, we will absolutely deliver on that. People say, you say that, how are you going to do it? Oh, we will do it. Because we are working already on getting out of the ECHR, repealing all these Human Rights Act bills. We will do it because it is about the will of the government to do it. And by the way, all that money that I've talked about will be used, spent by Glasgow Council, will of course be spent on you, on the things that are important to you. Only Reform will prioritise your housing needs. We will tackle the soaring welfare bill. And you know, in Scotland, that is forecast to increase to nearly £10 billion in 2030. We've got 800,000 people in Scotland who could be in work but are economically inactive at the end of 2025. These statistics, it's not sustainable. And this is a massive risk to the Scottish Government's financial position. This country is, whether it is England, Wales or Scotland, going bankrupt. Under the SNP, we've heard some of this talked about passionately this morning. Scotland's oil and gas industry has been destroyed, but Reform will rebuild it. The UK uses 1.4 million barrels of oil a day, but we import half of that. Half of that we import. Why? Why? In Scotland, you have the highest average gas and electricity bills in the UK, and yet you are surrounded by, walking on, look out to sea, you're surrounded by energy. But the mad net zero policies of this Labour government have ensured the demise of that industry. Do you know that, think about it this way, every new wind turbine that gets put up by Ed Miliband means that our energy bills go up because of the net zero levies that then attracts. Reform will cancel net zero. Reform will rebuild and restore the oil and gas industry and secure our energy supply, and therefore create jobs and income for Scotland. Now, Scotland has a proud history and it's played a pivotal role in the defence sector. I talk a lot about defence. It's a subject close to my heart. My dad was in the army, as you know, and I take every opportunity in Parliament to support our veterans. But in Scotland, the naval presence at Faslane is needed now more than ever and needs to receive more support and investment. And the same goes for the RAF Quick Reaction Alert Base at Lossiemouth. Only Reform will restore the military presence in Scotland. only reform will increase defence spending. And all governments talk to increasing it to 3% of GDP, but it needs to be more. We are living in times of unprecedented global insecurity, times that we haven't seen for decades. Clearly, we had the Ukraine, well, we've still got the Ukraine war, but now more than ever, the world is unstable. And as we all know, we can barely send one single warship out there to help. And then, of course, the education sector, which has been mentioned this morning in Scotland. We can't pretend anything other than the SNP has failed Scottish children. Under the SNP, performance in maths and English has fallen consistently for the last 15 years. There is an existential crisis in Scottish schools, which needs urgent attention, because if adults fail children in the most basic of provision, how can we expect them to lead prosperous, fulfilling lives, to be upwardly mobile, and to lift themselves out of the poverty that so many are in? And I feel very strongly about this, because I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for education. I moved myself from one place to another. I was the first in my family to go to university. I took every opportunity that came my way, and the only reason I'm here is education. I've got 2 sons of my own, and I am a passionate believer that we are failing children up and down the country at the moment with our education system. And don't get me started. I hosted yesterday a forum about what our children are being taught in schools and the indoctrination of some of our children in schools. Not all schools, but some children. What they are teaching, what they are being taught, is truly shocking. And I will always stand up to stop that happening. And of course, finally, what about the NHS? The NHS total waiting list in Scotland, 800,000 people at the moment, equates to 1 in 6, as Dr. David Bull said, waiting for treatment. It's no wonder, is it, that thousands of Scottish people are being forced to travel elsewhere in the UK looking for treatment. But just like the NHS in Scotland here, it's broken in England, it's broken in Wales. So we need experts like Dr. David Bull to take that on, head it up, and really sort it out. Now, the last thing I should mention, because of course it's one of your most famous industries, is the whisky industry, an industry that employs 40,000 and is worth well over 5 billion. But I have to confess, I have never actually had a glass of whisky. I know, I never have. And you know when you watch things on telly sometimes, and I always think it looks so cool when ladies sort of ask for a whiskey on the rocks. Is that what you do? I don't know. But it always looks very cool. So if anybody in this room wants to educate me in the art of whiskey drinking, then bring it on, because I think I'm probably old enough by now to have had my first glass of whiskey, and it's clearly been a part of my education that has been sorely missing. So I'm in Scotland. Someone get me a glass of whiskey. So just to finish, because I have to finish, otherwise David Bull comes running on and starts pushing me off. So just to say that, look, if you want change, if you want somewhere to pin your hopes for a better future for the people of Scotland, you must vote. Well, we know that you'll vote, but you need to get your friends, your family, your work colleagues, explain what you've seen today, what you've heard today, the authenticity of what we say, the feeling with which we say it, the commitment with which we believe what we're talking about. What I say to you, I say from the heart. I believe truly in what we're saying, and I believe in Nigel Farage, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. I wouldn't have put myself through the gruelling by-election that was Runcorn and Helsby, which of course we won, but only just, but I would do it again, and I would do it anywhere. And we need people like you, so many in this room today, putting themselves forward to be brave. Don't be intimidated. The next 3.5 years, if we have to last that long, are going to be rough. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But I will always lead the way. I will never be silenced. I can't wait for the police to come and arrest me for talking about Islam or something like that. Bring it on, bring it on. say thank you for everything you're doing. We can't do it without people like you, but we will do it. The People's Army is on the move. It's a great phrase. I don't know who thought of that. I think it might have been Lee, actually. But do you know what? It's so true. Up and down the country, the energy, the feeling, the enthusiasm, the hope, and that is what we're going to campaign on. And we will win. We will win. And Nigel Farage will be the next Prime Minister. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. I can't believe you've never drunk whiskey. You need to go for a night out with me and Malcolm Offord, and we will definitely teach you how to drink some fine Scottish whiskey. Well, next up, we have a man I've got to know very well indeed, particularly after that Burns supper. Now, he has a long track record in British politics. From 2021 to 2024, he served as Minister for Scotland, carrying out that role from the House of Lords and playing a key part in representing Scotland at the heart of the UK government. But last year, he made a very significant decision. He chose to put country before career, resigning from the House of Lords so he could take on the role of leader of Reform UK Scotland. Now, that was an incredibly bold move. It's one that shows his commitment to standing up for Scotland, for common sense politics, and for the future of our United Kingdom. He is a very proud Scot. He is a successful businessman and an even prouder unionist. Now, before we meet him, let's see his story.
What Malcolm Offord has done is, I believe, a very brave and principled move. After all, the House of Lords is a club for life, and he's given it all up to stand for reform, and he will lead this party into those elections on May the 7th.
One clear message, one objective: we want to remove this rotten SNP government after 18 years of failure. And this is now a two-horse race between Reform and the SNP. Ask yourself the question: have we got a better outcome for our young people in our schools? Have we got more cohesive and safer communities? And do we have an economy that works for everybody? And if the answer to these questions is no, isn't it time for a change? So we're well organised, we're well funded, and we're very well motivated. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
And with this, Lord Offord of Garville becomes Malcolm from Greenock.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome the leader of Reform UK Scotland. Please put your hands together and welcome Malcolm Offord.
What a welcome. Good afternoon, conference. My name is Malcolm Offord, and I'm standing to be First Minister at Holyrood. You know, it's 49 days. 49 days until Scotland decides, and 49 days for us to present our vision of a successful Scotland to the Scottish people. And 49 days to convince the public that Reform is the real alternative to this rotten SNP government. You know, for the last 20 years, this country's been governed by politicians who have no ambition to make Scotland successful, because they're professional politicians who've never been in business, never worked an extra shift, never had to make payroll on a Friday. They have punished ambition and aspiration at every turn, raising taxes, trapping people on welfare, allowing bureaucracy to bloat, all while public services crumble. They have badly managed the NHS. Our once world-class education has gone from outstanding to average, and crime, especially sexual assault, is spiralling upwards. They have failed at every turn to protect women and girls. Conference, no longer. On May 7th, we have the opportunity to give a voice to millions of Scots who've been taken for granted. Ordinary, decent, hard-working Scots who get punished for doing the right thing. A voice to those who want to work, to earn more and succeed for themselves and their communities. A voice to women and girls who do not want to fear for their safety. A voice to those who want better healthcare, decent roads, bustling high streets, and to get ideology out of their schools. A voice to those who want better healthcare, decent roads, and a voice to those who are fed up that our most important industries and jobs are being driven away, sacrificed on the high altar of net zero. And a voice to those who are sick to the back teeth of incessant yes versus no, never end them, and who say, enough. Who want Holyrood to work for them, to make their daily lives better, and to do that right now. So, yesterday, I was down in Greenock, my hometown. It was a great honour. I was there to submit my nomination papers at the municipal buildings. A building I know very well from growing up there. And, of course, the question is, who is this Malcolm from Greenock, and why Greenock? And the answer is my grandfather. So I'm a product of two grandfathers, one a proud Englishman from Portsmouth, the other a proud Aberdeenshire man with the Doric. And my English grandfather was a working-class boy. His family were Jack Tars down in Portsmouth. He was a bright lad, left school at 14, and he got himself into the engineering stream in the Royal Naval Dockyard in Portsmouth. He then got this dream posting with his wife and two young sons, my father and my uncle, to Hong Kong. And he was in the Royal Dockyard in Hong Kong, living the life. There's still these grainy black and white photographs of them in Kowloon Zoo having a wonderful time, moving in that lovely world of Hong Kong. And then the war broke out, 1939, a letter delivered to the house in Hong Kong, say you have to come home. Apparently my grandmother was in tears. She was loving that life out in Hong Kong, but she consoled herself by saying, well, at least I'm heading back home to Portsmouth. The last line of the letter said, and you'll be posted to Greenock on the River Clyde. So after consulting with the map, off they went to Greenock. And why Greenock? Because there was a munitions factory, and if those who know Greenock, it's called the Battery Park, still down there. My grandfather was trying to work out, he was using gyroscopes, trying to work out how to make torpedoes move in the water using gyroscope systems. And that's why I grew up in Greenock. My father and uncle were there. I went to school there. My local primary school, Argyll Primary, then to Greenock Academy. And then where I got a world-class education, absolutely fantastic, went to Edinburgh University. And then I discovered that I had something inside me. I was ambitious. I was driven, wanted to prove myself. And, I was what you might call a lad of parts. And to quote that phrase, Dr. Johnson, back in the day, there's no finer sight than a Scotsman on the high road to England. And I wanted to get to where the money was. And Big Bang had happened in 1986, and I didn't want to be a lawyer. I decided that. And so I thought, I'm going to try something different. And off I went to London. And I arrived there, as I say, I knew one person. I slept on this pal of mine from Paisley. I slept on his floor. And off I went on my journey, driven by this desire to be successful, but absolutely rock solid in the knowledge that I was a proud Scot from a good town, had been given a great education, and nothing was going to hold me back. And that is the sort of pride and determination and drive that I had, and many like me in my generation coming out of Greenock. At that time, the town was deindustrializing. We all had to leave to go to jobs around the world. There's a lot of successful people came out of that. But I think that's really what I'm trying to instill in this conversation that we have for Reform UK, which is that drive and ambition that I used perhaps to begin with for myself and for my family, and I want to use that to make Scotland successful. The drive and ambition I have is to make Scotland successful. Scotland, I believe, is underperforming, and I feel that it's incumbent upon us to change that, and it's time now for Reform UK in Scotland to unleash Scotland's potential. Now, getting into politics, from a business career. Sometimes not the easiest thing to do. I've been in it for 5 years. And one of the policies that came to my attention quite early on when I was in the Scotland office was this thing about energy and net zero. And this is perhaps the most egregious example of how policy can go wrong. And it's gone wrong across all the parties, whether it's the Labour Party who started it, the Conservative Party who compounded it, and the SNP who've consolidated it. And basically, what we've done to ourselves in shutting down North Sea oil and gas is the biggest act of self-harm. And surely this week of all weeks, as we see the oil price spiking through $115, we can recognise that. But just in terms of my own journey, I made my maiden speech on the 20th of January, 2022, in the House of Lords. I was just a newly minted minister in the Scotland office, working with Alistair Jack. And I was just shortly off to the COP26 in Glasgow. And the Conservative lines were, the transition is a good thing, the just transition. The Conservative Party had put through the net zero target and put that into law. Theresa May's government had done that. So I gave the line, and I was perfectly, without knowing the subject particularly well, it seemed like a good idea, let's have this transition. Well, 5 years later, I gave a speech, 3 years later, I gave a speech on the 3rd of April 2025 in the House of Lords, where I basically stood up and said that this net zero was a mistake, was doing great harm to our country, and should be reversed. And the biggest darts I had in my back were ones from my own side. Because the architects of this in the Conservative Party could not accept that they have to wind that back. And that is why reform has to do that. And for those who say to me, well, Malcolm, you seem to have changed your tune on that, I would simply quote to them John Maynard Keynes. Remember when he said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What actually happened was, in opposition, I did the work to find out what had really gone on in energy. I peeled back the onion to discover that our energy costs are 7 times more expensive than China and 4 times more expensive than the USA, that we import 70% of our gas from Norway, from Norwegian oil fields, over the fence from the ones in the North Sea that we've shut down. Even the Norwegian energy minister thinks that's daft. That as we look around our landscape, we see the wind turbines, not a single blade made in Scotland. Please try and explain what a just transition looks like to people in Aberdeen or in Grangemouth. It's just not possible to explain it away. And so therefore, I think a major element of that decision for me, obviously, was coming on the back of the energy brief. And we know, I'm about to hear, obviously, from Nigel, that Reform UK is fundamentally pledged to reverse the madness of net zero. And Nigel is fundamentally pledged to cut energy bills for the ordinary people of this country. But it's not just in energy where Scots are being punished by the SNP. Scots who want more for themselves, for their families, for their communities in Scotland are now being made to pay the highest taxes anywhere else in the UK. Why are council taxes across Scotland in 2 weeks' time about to go up by more than inflation? Why are families in Glasgow and Edinburgh and the bigger cities to be saddled with even higher new council tax bans, taxes that will hit families and pensioners? Not so much a mansion tax, much more a terrace tax. Why are business rate valuations about to rise in 2 weeks' time on average by 12%, just when rents and energy bills and the cost of labour have also risen? And why are business rates so much higher anyway than in England? And for that matter, across every single band. Why is LBTT so needlessly high? Punishing young Scots for moving closer to opportunities, punishing families for having children, and pensioners for downsizing to make room for them. Why are income taxes for teachers, police officers, nurses and doctors all so much higher than in England? And now we hear the SNP say they'd also like to confiscate some of their hard-earned savings too. No wonder those with the broadest shoulders are now shrugging their shoulders. Because the exam question is, for all this spend on your behalf, taken from your pockets, from your hard work, the question is, are our public services better? Yes or no? Are our public sector better? No. No. We have a record amount of spending and we don't have a reward for it. That is what Reform UK must change. Now, by their own admission, over the last 10 years, certainly the last 20 years, but certainly the last 10 years, the SNP have used an expression to say that they've built something called a welfare economy. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to do is to create a wealth economy. We have 5.5 million population. We've got 3.6 million Scots of working age. And they break down into three groups. We have 1 million who don't work. We have 600,000 in the public sector, and we have 2 million who work in the private sector. And what has happened here is we've got the balance is now wrong between welfare and work. If you choose to work, you should always have more in your pocket at the end of the week. Now, there are those in our community who cannot work, and we must always look after those. And in fact, if we look at the million who do not work, and if we were to take out, for example, the students, the early retirees, the adult carers, the long-term disabled, there's probably about 500,000 that quite genuinely need to be looked after and will always be looked after in a compassionate society. But we have 500,000 of our neighbours and friends who perhaps have fallen out of the way of work, who have actually been stuck on welfare. And of course, welfare has been a good safety net, but we've got an issue now where the balance between those in the street who don't work and those who choose to get out of bed and go work 35 hours is now wrong. And what we need to do is help our folk back to work. For this reason, the best welfare we can give anybody is a job. And of course, the welfare economy is also very good for the public sector, and they do a lot of important jobs. But they have had 20 years of upward-only salary increases, no redundancy, and still holding on to final salary pension schemes that went in the private sector a long time ago. The reality is that 2 million who work in the private sector are now being paid less than those in the public sector, and I think the big emphasis for reform in the next 10 years is to grow the private sector, and that is what we shall focus on. You know, we have an opportunity to build a new economy. In Scotland, we're extraordinarily lucky to have natural centres of excellence, sectors where we excel because of our geography, because of our scientists, because of our heritage, because of our creative and smart people. Just running through them, we've got financial services, we have advanced manufacturing, we have energy, obviously, we have food and drink, we have hospitality and tourism, we have creative industries, we have life sciences, we have agri, we have fisheries and marine. And those sectors of Scottish excellence, where we're generally working, let's take, for example, life sciences, just pick one. Life sciences, we're third in the world. Our Scottish universities cluster in life sciences. We're third after MIT and Cambridge. That's extraordinary. So we have great strength and depth, and they are across the whole country. They're not just in Edinburgh and Glasgow. These are industries that cover the whole of Scotland. We now to rebalance our economy and our education system and our technical training and our third sector colleges to get our young people focused into those natural centres of excellence, to rebuild a modern economy which pays good wages, where work will always pay more than not to work. So that's why our first priority in our manifesto today, and you've seen that, we've now got that published today. I think we're the first of the parties to now come out with our manifesto. Of course, we were told that we didn't have any policies, we didn't have any candidates. Well, I think we're going to knock that on the head quite well today. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut taxes. Scots are overtaxed. Scots are overtaxed, overregulated, and it's just a continual process of hitting those with the broadest shoulders. So, here's the plan. We've got ourselves in a ridiculous situation in Scotland where we've now got 6 separate income tax bands, which is creating all sorts of disincentives. The law of unintended consequences, it's creating a lot of disincentive in the workplace. So we're going to cut those back to the 3 in the rest of the UK and align back to the 3 bands. And then we're going to cut them all by 1p below. So if you work in Scotland, you'll pay 1p less in each band than you do in England. Now, the cost of this is $2 billion. It costs $1.2 billion to align the 6 bands to 3, and then each 1p cut costs $800 billion. So it's £2 billion. And so, of course, all the commentators say, where are you getting the £2 billion from? That's impossible. How are you going to, what services are you going to cut? Look, the reality is that $2 billion is 3% of the Holyrood budget. So we can find that 3% without any need to cut frontline services to achieve these savings. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the hall here, how many of you in this hall are involved in some way with business? Please put your hands up. Now, if I said to you overnight, keep your hands up, if I said to you overnight, I want you to find 3% cuts in your cost base but keep the business stable at the top line. If you think you could not cut by 3%, please put your hand down. So, I don't see any hands going down. Everybody who's in business knows that you can cut probably up to 5% of your costs without affecting frontline services. And the great irony of this, if we talk to our councillor friends in the various town councils, every year Holyrood asks the town councils, asks the local authorities to cut their budgets by 5%. Well, you know what? We're going to do Pac-Man here. We're going to reverse it. We're going to push it back up to Holyrood, and we're going to say, you cut your costs by 3%. And by doing that, we can immediately back ambition by putting that money straight back into people's pockets, who will always do more with it and spend it better than any government can. And that, by doing that, by cutting it by 1p, Scotland then would become the most competitive tax regime in the UK. And of course, our objective is to make Scotland the best place to live and work in the UK. And if Nigel was here, I'd say, Nigel, watch out, we're coming after you. But this doesn't mean just backing ambitious Scots who run businesses and work in the private sector. It also means an immediate pay rise across our public services too, rewarding those with experience, encouraging them to no longer cut back their hours or retire early, and allowing us more easily to hire to fill the gaps. So, for example, it means that a teacher with 5 years' experience takes home an extra £2,000 a year. A newly promoted police sergeant takes home an extra £2,100 a year. A hospital consultant with a year's experience takes home an extra £5,200 a year. These are not small sums, and they're rewarding frontline work across the board. And here's the thing, especially in our NHS, we know that as nurses are being dragged up into higher tax bands, as we've now got 6 bands where if you go across the band, you lose, not only do you pay more tax, you also lose some of your other benefits in return and pay very higher marginal tax rates. We've got a productive issue and amongst our brilliant nurses and doctors who are now managing their workflow to make sure they don't do the extra hour in order to not be caught. If we can eliminate this and immediately put money back into people's pockets, they will go the extra mile because that's the sort of people that they are. So, conference, look, this is just the beginning of our plan to create a new wealth economy which provides world-class services for all. We will also implement a new deal for local government, putting them on a firm financial footing by restoring local control over spending, rather than saddling them with unfunded obligations from Holyrood. It's one of the great mysteries to me that the SNP government continually cry for more devolution, more powers, please, from London, more powers in London. When they arrive in Edinburgh, they get stuck in Edinburgh. They don't go down the line to local communities. On NHS Scotland, there is no silver bullet. However, with 20 billion of funding, the NHS is not short of funding. What is required is better management to produce better outcomes for patients. Now, this will need to be done on a consensual basis with the medical profession, and that's why we'll immediately establish an independent expert Scottish Healthcare Reform Commission to undertake an ambitious review of healthcare delivery with action plans on very specific things. So, for example, a workforce plan to train more doctors and nurses, dealing with the delayed discharge to increase hospital efficiency, optimising the integration of social adult care, and shifting to prevention strategies around our persistent health inequalities, and most important of all, expansion of frontline services in the community and in GP surgeries. Reform in Scotland will get NHS Scotland focused on patients, not on managers. Our schools. Our state schools are in crisis. Out of just 700,000 children of school age in Scotland, 1/3 don't attend school regularly. This is a staggering statistic. Surely we can just all agree now that something has gone badly wrong in our schools. Parents are disillusioned with the curriculum for excellence, and in special needs provision, the SNP policy of inclusion has been exposed as an illusion. Head teachers are discouraged to exclude disruptive pupils. They're not in control of school budgets or their teacher recruitment choices. Staff morale is at an all-time low, and the attainment gap between rich and poor pupils is widening. Reform will reboot the curriculum for excellence with a knowledge-based core, restore rigorous exams and standardised testing, and rejoin all the international educational surveys so Scotland's performance can be properly measured. How can we possibly have allowed our education to go from outstanding to average? Staggers me. Head teachers will be able to regain control of their budgets and hiring. Mobile phones will be banned in classrooms. And all secondary schools will be able to apply for the Jordan Hill-style self-governance model. Reform will restore Scottish education to world class. Conference, when I joined Reform UK a few months ago, by my own admission, it was not primarily because of immigration. My focus has first and foremost always been about making Scotland the most successful part of the UK, a nation that rewards ambition and work and reaps the benefit through higher incomes and better public services. But since acknowledging that immigration is now a top 3 issue of concern for Scots, I have taken the time to see with my own eyes why a growing number of Scots are so fed up about immigration, especially in our working class communities. That's why I did the overnight check-in at the homeless shelter in Glasgow, and a big shout out in the hall today for Colin and Lewis, who looked after me. Who are you guys? Good to see you. Doing an amazing job. You must talk to them afterwards to understand what they do. They have 30 beds in that hostel in Glasgow Street. I did the check-in for 12. But of that evening, of the 30, only 2 were local Glaswegians that came in that evening. I also walked the city streets late at night with a group of volunteers called North to South, concerned about people's safety in the city after dark. At this point, I should apologise to the volunteers at North to South, who have been unfairly smeared by the press as vigilantes. They are volunteers, mums and dads, who walk around the city centre in high-vis jackets in full view of the police, unarmed and with first aid on hand to help local people get home safely after a night out. They must hold protecting vulnerable groups, scheme memberships, and undergo disclosure checks in order to volunteer. North to South are as much vigilantes as the Neighbourhood Watch, street pastors, or countless volunteers who assist the vulnerable. But conference, the fact that this group of volunteers exists today, as I said, local mums and dads, tells us we have a problem. To ignore this is to gaslight the local population. The reality is that this is a symptom of an underlying problem, with police overstretched to deal with a record number of strangers coming to Glasgow with different cultures and values to our own, making the city less safe for women and girls. Why has this been ignored by the Hollywood bubble when polling makes it a top 3 issue of concerns for Scottish voters? The Scottish Government's own data is crystal clear. Cases of sexual assaults are on the rise, with cases of rape and attempted rape up by 26% in the last 5 years. These are crimes that disproportionately affect women and girls. In the meantime, local people are rightly aggrieved when they see priority given in services, especially in housing, being given to strangers who have just arrived. This is a direct consequence of the SNP policy in 2022 to drop the local connection rule, which required local councils to give priority in housing to local people first. Conference, I say right here and now, Reform will immediately reinstate the local connection rule to give priority of services to local people. Local people are tired of their concerns being brushed under the carpet because politicians and the media find it uncomfortable to talk about this. So I will not hold my tongue because they deserve to be heard. The people of Scotland need to know that it's only Reform who will close this idiotic loophole that's allowing people who have never so much as visited Scotland before to claim taxpayer-funded accommodation at ever-growing expense, putting our social housing under pressure and allowing strangers to skip the queue ahead of residents who need it most. This is an injustice which the Reform government will immediately end. So, conference. Scotland is now at a crossroads. And the Holyrood election is the most critical we have had in 20 years. Under the SNP's failed government, all we've got in Scotland is mid-table mediocrity. The sad reality, and I hate to say this as a proud Scot, but I have to accept it. The sad reality is that Scotland is broken. But it doesn't need to be this way. I know that all of you are just as ambitious as I am to put Scotland back at the top of the table, to make Scotland the most successful part of the UK. It will take 10 years to achieve this. So let's put aside all the rancour, grievance and division promoted by the SNP. Let all Scots unite around this common aim to make Scotland the best country to live and work in the world. This is a Scotland where 3 million people work to provide for 2.5 million who can't. A balanced society where work is cool, where work is rewarded and always pays more than welfare. Where our young people are channeled into meaningful jobs straight from education. And we reskill our adults back into work in our 10 centres of excellence located around the whole of Scotland, not just the big cities. Where we repopulate our town centres with working families and affordable housing. Or where our towns and city centres are bustling once again with activity and civic pride. Where we have the most competitive tax rates in the UK, which allow our creative and innovative people to be productive and solve problems in their local communities without interference from Holyrood. Where we restore our schools and hospitals once again to world class, where our economy goes at 3% rather than a measly 1% per annum, and where our communities are cohesive and integrated, where Scots are happier, healthier and wealthier. That is my ambition for Scotland. And that is why I gave up my lifetime cosy seat in the House of Lords. And that's why I wish to serve the people of Scotland as First Minister in Holyrood. Conference Reform UK is a remarkable movement of ordinary, decent, hard-working Scots who've had enough of the status quo and who demand change. We'll get 49 days until Scotland decides, and we're in second place in 54 out of 73 constituencies. We're told we've got no policies. Well, here we have them. And you're about to meet 73 candidates. So we got that as well. So we're in good shape. We've got 49 days to spread the message of hope to every corner of the country, from Wick to Wigton, and everywhere in between, so we can finally turn the corner on 2 decades of national decline. Conference, I leave you with this call to action as you head home to your own constituencies. For change, for hope, vote Reform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Malcolm, thank you so much for such a passionate speech. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us nicely to our final speaker. The question is, who could that possibly be, I wonder? Well, he's a man who needs literally no introduction. He's arguably the most famous politician in this country, if not the world. His career, well, it's long, it's distinguished, and it's most certainly varied, let me tell you. Thanks to I'm a Celebrity, he's gained a whole legion of new, young supporters. There isn't much of this man I haven't seen, let me just tell you. And this man also has never shied away from a fight. He took on Nat West, didn't he? And he won. He then went on. He took on YouGov, and he won. And let me tell you, at the next election, he will take on the establishment, and he will win. And ladies and gentlemen, soon he will make history again when he becomes the next British Prime Minister. Now, just before we meet him, let's remind ourselves of his story.
We are all ships rising on a turquoise tide, headed towards winning the next general election. This government is deep in crisis. They are not fit to govern. The Conservative Party are riven. There is a new, strong, unified party, the party that stands up for decent working people, and we are the party on the rise. The energy has been unbelievable. The enthusiasm has been extraordinary. You are the people's army. Reform is now in government. And the big shout-out message, and it's very, very clear, is if you vote Reform, you get reform. And when it comes to country, of what a nation is, this is where I do personally want to confront the Prime Minister head on.
No one cares more about the state of this country than I do.
There is nobody more determined than me.
But I tell you what, folks, that was just the beginning. Thank you very much indeed.
The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, MP.
afternoon, Scotland! Now, if you thought, oh, have a look, you need a haircut, mate. You need a haircut. Well, yeah, you do. Wow. Go back to work. No, sorry, you haven't got a job, have you? Well, there you are. Those that don't work have plenty of time to come and protest, don't they? I bet you he's not self-employed running his own business, is he? I bet he doesn't understand what government at all levels has put on hard-working people in this country, the highest ever level of taxes during the lowest period of growth, where people work longer hours than they ever had to, and where often their next-door neighbours rise at midday, have Deliveroo come and smoke dope for the afternoon. And you know what? That is exactly what Malcolm was just talking about. We have, frankly, and it's been going on for years, by freezing tax thresholds and much else, by punishing those that are self-employed or run small businesses, we've become a country where work for many people, frankly, doesn't pay. And we are the party of Alarm Clock Britain. We are the party of people who get up in the morning, go to work, do their bit, pay their taxes, believe in our nation, defend its culture, and frankly, we're all they've got left. I actually can't think of a time when we had a worse Prime Minister than Keir Starmer. The guy is a disaster. And as we go through a period of both national and very extreme international crises, I think the energy crisis should now be the biggest wake-up call that Scotland and the North Sea have ever had. Just think about this. Last year, on the other half of the North Sea, in exactly the same fields, the Norwegians drilled 49 new wells. 49 new wells for gas and oil as part of a projected 250 that they intend to develop over the course of the next few years. How many new wells opened up on our side of the North Sea? 0. And how many will open up this year? 0. We charge 78% super taxes on any profits a prospector makes. We refuse to open up licences, and we are not self-sufficient, which we ought to be in oil and gas. And you know something? We open up the North Sea. We create here in Scotland thousands of well-paid jobs, better revenue for the Exchequer, and with gas, cheaper energy prices for every household and every business in this nation. And yet, we're the only people that can stand and say this, because it was the Conservative government nationally that went down the net zero route. Boris. It's hard not to laugh, isn't it, really? We're going to be the Saudi Arabia of wind. Remember all that? And now we've got Red Ed Miliband and an SNP who, under Alex Salmond, the SNP recognised that oil was a very important strategic asset for Scotland, but they now believe that somehow Chinese-made wind turbines will solve Scotland's future. Through a result of net zero lunacy, we have closed down the North Sea, and we've given ourselves the highest industrial energy prices in the world. And you wonder why the country is deindustrialising. We've learnt today that the last primary steelmaker in the United Kingdom, the last one in Scunthorpe, will now be closing. We will be the only major Western country that does not produce primary steel. Why? Because the energy price is too high. I met Jim Ratcliffe recently. Grangemouth, barely surviving, and yet his firm about to make a £3 billion investment in North America, where his energy price will be a quarter or less of what he's currently paying. We are committing economic harry-carry in the name of saving the planet, when actually what we're doing is exporting carbon emissions for the goods to be made in India and then shipped back to us. And they're all part of it. They're all part of the sameness of Holyrood, aren't they? They all agree. They all agree on net zero. They all agree in their own great virtues. Well, we agree in opening up the North Sea, getting Scotland working again, getting Scotland cheaper energy. And you know what? After this election and all the ones to come, we're the only ones that will deliver good, plain, common sense and a better way of life for everybody. And we are the only people who will stand up and defend British culture. Malcolm mentioned at the end immigration as an issue. There was a myth for years that no one in Scotland cared about immigration. But it's just not true, is it? It's just not true. I mean, not only is Glasgow now the asylum capital of the United Kingdom, but Holyrood have even passed a law in favour of it. They seem to think that you want young men from Afghanistan who come by boat across the English Channel to get privileges that ex-servicemen living rough on the streets of Glasgow can't have. Well, we know where we stand, and we stand with our people, not those who enter Britain illegally. And mass migration. The Boris wave. 3 million people came in under Boris. Now, if they were all accountants or brain surgeons who fully integrated in our culture, we might not have a problem. But guess what? Only 20% of the 3 million came on work permits. Many of the others will never work in this country and live after a brief period on benefits for the rest of their lives. And if they've come from a subcontinent, they've come from a Commonwealth country, they have the right to vote in general elections on day one. And we are now seeing sectarianism have a massive effect on British politics. Now, I put it to you that what happened in Trafalgar Square this week should act as a wake-up call and a warning to everybody. We have always been a country that believes in religious tolerance. We've always been open to those of different faiths, persuasions, and beliefs coming to our country and having their own private observance, but integrating publicly. And I think, to be honest, the Jewish community is probably the best example I can think of that. But mass public praying, mass chanting of Islamic slogans in Trafalgar Square was a shock. Until you learn that the same group, the Ramadan Tent Project, have done it in Coventry Cathedral. They've done it in London's Guildhall. They've done it in the Victoria and Albert Museum. Folks, if it hasn't come to Scotland yet, it will come soon. This is an open, deliberate, willful attempt, not at the private observance of a different religion, but the attempt to overtake, intimidate, and dominate our way of life. And it is funded by the taxpayer. £44 million last year of taxpayers' money went to fund projects like this. Now, we are fair, reasonable, tolerant people, but we will not put up with this, and we will, as a party, stand firm for the Christian principles upon which our nation was built. Now, saying that Starmer is the worst Prime Minister in history, Scotland has had a succession of First Ministers from whom it's difficult to pick which was the worst one. What is of no doubt is that Scotland is in a very bad way. The economics, the education, the health delivery, the drug deaths, whichever way we look, we see social decline. And we have to offer young people in Scotland hope, belief that going on benefits is not the way forward, belief that learning proper trades and skills from the age of 16 is the way for so many to succeed, but only by reindustrialising, only by getting cheaper energy, only by beginning to change the culture that exists in too much of lowland Scotland can we achieve these things. And the manifesto that has been put to you today is a bold attempt to make a start at making Scotland competitive again, at making Scotland economically attractive again. And I think Malcolm was very frank when he said it is a 10-year project. You cannot turn around chronic problems like this literally overnight. But goodness me, this is needed. The consensus that has built up in Holyrood around most major policies has frankly made the parties virtually indistinguishable over the course of the last few years. This election is going to be different. And I'll tell you why it's going to be different. It's the fella sitting over there, who is unafraid to challenge the Holyrood consensus, unafraid to challenge the cosy club that has built up around Holyrood, around the Quangos, around much of the media, around almost the entirety of the political class. He's prepared to stand up on your behalf and challenge all of that. And already we can see with his every pronouncement, they're going potty. Offered derangement syndrome has set in to Scottish politics. Well, all I can say is good. Good because it means it takes the pressure off me. And good because it's high time that somebody dropped a rock in the pool and started a proper debate about what is going wrong in Scotland and what the answers and the solutions may be offered on your behalf with our candidates. We'll do that over the course of the next 7 weeks, where we will establish a big number in Holyrood. We'll become the official opposition, and who knows? Who knows? If it catches fire, who knows what we might be capable of. So I want to say, my reception in Scotland seems to get better with each year that goes by. There was a moment some years ago when confronted by a bunch of nationalist yobs in the street, all of them with very wide pupils. I could never work out quite why that might have been. And the Edinburgh police locked me in a pub for the afternoon for my safety. How about that? There were a couple of old boys in the corner said it's the best thing's happened to this boozer in 40 years. Scottish politics, up until this point, has been very, very hostile to any other voice. They may go on being hostile to our other voice, but you know something? Now they can't stop us. And I'll be here with you repeatedly, supporting our candidates, supporting Malcolm, supporting this campaign between now and the 7th of May. And I'm pleased and honoured to have been able to join you this afternoon at this manifesto launch. Thank you very much indeed. happy? Never happy? You want to join Reform? We're all very happy, aren't we? We've got lots of them, so Malcolm, we're going to have to battle through. Okay, we're going to begin with Tony Maguire, GB News.
Good afternoon, Nigel and Malcolm. I just wanted to ask you a bit more of a national story to kick us off here. Sadiq Khan has told an Italian newspaper that he wants Labour to pledge to rejoin the EU if they win the next general election. Just wanted your thoughts on that, but also perhaps how should the SNP take that? Because they've been told for 10 years now not that they've been shut down any opportunity to revisit their referendum.
If the SNP were a nationalist party that believed in the independence of Scotland, they would not wish to leave the UK and hand it over to Brussels and join the euro. They're a bunch of hypocrites and need to be exposed as such. As for Khan, Rachel Reeves, all of them, they haven't got the imagination. They can't see the world's moved on. Why would we rejoin a bunch of economies, many of whom are doing even worse than we are, and shackle ourselves to them? It's complete madness. It won't fly. And by the way, we've got Lila Cunningham taking on Sadiq Khan as Mayor of London in 2028. And he will be out. He'll be out. Glenn Campbell, BBC Scotland. Sorry. Oh, come on, give him a break. Give him a break.
It's nice to feel that warm welcome. Nigel Farage, when you see the sharp spike in energy prices, do you regret saying that the UK should stand by America in the action against Iran?
The action against Iran was a decision taken by the Americans and the Israelis. We weren't part of it. I wasn't part of it. But you know something, in life you have to pick a side. And I think to have forbidden the Americans from using Diego Garcia, for example, was a terrible mistake. A terrible mistake. And we don't have to agree with everything America does. We don't have to join the offensive. I mean, how could we? It's now 19 days since a sovereign base was attacked in Cyprus, and not a single Royal Naval vessel has yet arrived. So we should support them. I'm not suggesting getting involved in the war. We're too weak and puny, even if we wanted to. But if we cast America off completely, our islands are defenceless. That is the point I'm making. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, come in anytime you want, Michael. We'll try and wrap this through. Ewan Petrie from STV. This is like a pantomime, isn't it?
Merry Christmas, Mr. Farage. My question is about timing today. Your conference began at exactly the same time as First Minister's questions. The Holyrood Parliament was also referred to this morning as a concrete jungle. Isn't that displaying a level of contempt for a Parliament to which you are hoping to get members elected?
Oh, I'm very good at that. I expressed lots of contempt for the European Parliament, but in 2019, we became the biggest party in the whole of Europe. Look, to a large extent, the timings of this today were around my schedule, travelling right across the United Kingdom. There was no direct disrespect to the institution meant, but we do believe it needs reform, Malcolm.
We need to reform Holyrood. There is a cosy consensus there, and what Reform wants to do is get in there to represent ordinary people. And the reality is that Holyrood is not delivered. Holyrood's been going for 25 years, and just get this single stat on this. When devolution started in 1999, the spending in Scotland's percentage of GDP was 43%. Today, 25 years later, Holyrood is spending 55% of GDP. Are our public services better?
I think that answers it. Peter Smith, ITV News. It's pretty simple, really. It's terrible, really.
Thank you. Mr Farage, you have spent years telling voters in England that the Barnett formula is unfair because it gives the Scots too much money. You've promised them that you will fix that. Is that a message that you will be delivering on the doorsteps of Dundee and Glasgow in this election? And if so, can we come and film you telling people that the Scots get too much money and that Reform plan to change that? A question for Mr Offord. The man beside you is committing to his English base that there will be less money sent to Scotland. You're promising the Scottish voters you'll cut £2 billion in tax. How are we going to fund the public services that this underpins, the police, the NHS in Scotland, the schools?
Within a few years of a Reform government in Holyrood, you won't need the current Barnett formula because Scotland will have been turned around. And even the culture of saying we must get more and more and more from central government, if you think about it, it's the wrong mindset. It's the wrong mindset. Yes, of course, individuals go through bad times, countries go through bad times, but welfare spending should not be permanent. There are massive economic opportunities in Scotland, firstly in the North Sea. I also believe financial services in Edinburgh could be a lot bigger with the right thinking than it is. So look, we as national government would be here to support Scotland, but we'd much rather see Scotland not need the money because it's succeeded. And our message is one about hope. Good.
I'll just deal with it.
Yeah.
So on the question of how Scotland is financed, you know the JERS report comes out every year. We know that's an accurate reflection of Scotland's finances. In the last JERS report, it states that we spend in Scotland 117.5 billion, and we raise in taxes 87.3. That means we've got a 30 billion deficit paid for through the block grant. Now, that equates to 12% of GDP, and John Swinney is telling his supporters he wants to join the EU when the EU demand a 3% maximum deficit. If you want to see cuts, the amount of cuts that if they joined the EU, Scotland would demand would be 20 billion. We're looking for 2 billion of cuts, and we know we can get that from a concept of breaking down ideological spend on environmental, and we know we're spending 6.5 billion, 132 unaccountable quangos. We know that we can find 3% of the Holyrood budget. And this is the thing, that when we put that money into £2 billion cut, we will over 10 years, we can earn 8 billion back. And that is how we'll fix the deficit in Scotland, which the SNP refused to acknowledge.
James Cook from BBC News.
Thanks very much, Mr Farage. Good afternoon. For one question to yourself, Mr Farage, if I may, why should the people of England pay higher taxes than the people of Scotland? And for Malcolm Offord, your manifesto here says you are against rancour and division, and yet you stood there dividing the people of Glasgow into locals and strangers. Is that not simply stirring up rancour and division?
You go first. You go first.
Whether you like it or not, from the BBC, you need to go and visit our working class communities to find people are upset, scared, divided, and no longer cohesive. There's not something we're making up. Glasgow has got a fantastic track record of integration, of immigration over 75 years. Am I correct? Yes. Okay? But what we have not had is in 5 years a sudden influx of men from countries that most of us have never been to where they don't speak English, and we know that they've come to Glasgow because the local connection rule is broken. They will get free food and lodgings in Glasgow they can't get in England. That is not fair on local people. That is not divisive. We're trying to do the opposite. We want cohesive communities.
In successful economies like America, which is growing at 4% a year compared to our just about zero, different states charge different rates of taxes. It's called competition. There was a Scot called Adam Smith a few years ago, and this is the 250th year of his book, funny enough, who understood that competition is good. if we in Scotland were to become more competitive, or you in Scotland, I should say, become more competitive than us in England, the English will moan and say, why can't we have this too? So I think it's a very, very good thing. And if Scotland becomes, through its own common sense and good budget management, more competitive as a place to be than England, then very, very good luck to you. Thank you. Catherine Sampson, Channel 4.
Malcolm Offord, you said at the start of this you want to be the next First Minister. Mr Farage, you then said you want reform to become the official opposition. There appears to be an ambition gap here. Is that because winning would actually be the worst thing that could happen to reform in Scotland because you'll be forced to deliver?
No, it's simply, Catherine, because I'm so modest, shy and understated in virtually everything that I do, and I never like to oversell. I like to undersell and overdeliver. And I genuinely think that there is an energy and an enthusiasm and a sense of optimism about what we're offering and what we want to have debated, and I think we really could surprise you. And that's all I'm going to say on the subject. Thank you. David Walker, Scottish Daily Express.
Hi both. First, a couple of questions for you, Nigel. You suggested in your speech that the Islamic chanting you see at Trafalgar Square will come to Scotland. Could you please expand on that a wee bit? Ways are going to happen and why? And John Swinney suggested that the Reform voters and anti-immigration people are racist. What's your thoughts on that? And Malcolm, in your manifesto you said you're going to reduce the number of MSPs. Why would you do that? Why would you reduce the number of MSPs?
Look, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is prescribed in most Arab countries in the world, is still allowed to flourish in this country. It has an agenda, a dangerous agenda, which is they don't want to adopt or integrate with our way of life. They want to impose their way of life on us. And what you saw in Trafalgar Square, what you've seen in Coventry, are examples of that. I promise you, if it's happening in the Midlands, Scotland is not far behind. And I want to say this. The attempt, really since Blair's time, to shut down any rational debate about immigration, population explosion, or culture, the attempt to shut it down by screaming racist, do you know what? It doesn't work anymore. No one's listening.
On the Holyrood question, everybody in this room knows that Holyrood is underperforming for the Scottish people. Now, Holyrood has got control over devolved matters, and Westminster looks after reserved matters. Again, 80% of daily life in Scotland is influenced by Holyrood. Let me ask you this question. What percentage of Holyrood debating time is given to devolved matters, the schools, the hospitals, the roads, instead of ridiculous debates on international matters or reserved matters to London? Holyrood needs reform.
Yeah, very good. Justin Bowie, Press and Journal.
Thanks, both. A question also covering the Courier. Nigel, your comments were brought up regarding the tightening of handgun laws after the Dunblane tragedy recently. Given it's 30 years on from that and it's been brought up recently, do you regret your comments at the time, and would you stand by your views that those comments were knee-jerk? Or sorry, that the laws were knee-jerk?
No, we should ban everything. Let's ban everything. All I said was, I thought it was ludicrous that the British Olympic shooting team had to go to Calais to practice when we have armouries all over this country where guns of all kinds could perfectly safely be kept and used. After all, our forces have them under lock and key and the public have no access to them. But this is, I'm afraid, the world we're living in. We're living in a world where politicians think their job is to make government bigger, taxes higher, and control of every aspect of our lives, frankly, in many cases, taken away from us. On to Mark McLaughlin, The Scottish Sun.
Good afternoon. You spoke earlier and you said that Scotland was a tolerant society. On the front page of the Scottish Sun today, we have someone promoting terrorism, but it was Paolo Nutini saying up the Ra. A couple of weeks ago, we had a riot in Ibrox, people saying up the Ra and fuck the Pope. So do you also condemn our homegrown sectarianism as much as you do imported sectarianism? And
yes,
also,
of course.
And
yes.
also, you spoke about cohesive communities. I listened to Thomas Kerr's speech. He talked about deporting scumbags, a people's army, ready for battle, man the barricades. We're not here to be friendly. We're not here to be part of the consensus. We're here to rip it up. Do you not think that when people are as angry as you say they are, that kind of language, militaristic language, could be dangerous and inflame tensions rather than build cohesive communities?
I've used the phrase people's army for a very, very long time, and we are a people's army, but we're not armed with weapons, we're armed with passion in our hearts, all right? And that is our people's army. Those of us of a certain age have grown up with sectarianism in Northern Ireland politics and specimens of sectarianism in Scottish football. Luckily, fairly isolated, although punch-ups at Ibrox and fights have become quite a part of normal life. If that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what does. That is competing religions, and in some places, a competing view of the future of the island of Ireland. What I'm talking about, and by the way, the vast majority of Muslims in Britain want no part of any of this. Want no part of any of this. I'm talking about a willful attempt by bad actors who should be prescribed by law in this country, backed up unbelievably by taxpayer funding, that want to take over this country and turn it into something different. And if we don't stand up and fight, we'll jolly well lose. We're going to fight, I promise you. Okay. Kathleen Nutt from the Herald.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. A question for Mr Farage first. You have ruled out an independence referendum for the next 10 years. You're saying that the focus should be on rebuilding Scotland over that period. So after 10 years, if things go according to your plan, when Scotland is more prosperous, as you say you want it to be, happier and healthier, would you, if you're Prime Minister at that point, grant an independence referendum? And my question for Malcolm Offord is, you talked a lot about about your university education and about the importance of education. So would Reform commit to keeping university free for Scottish students, so there'd be no tuition fees for Scottish students? Thank you.
Look, the point I made was, people were promised here in 2014 that the referendum on separation from the United Kingdom was a once-in-a-generation thing. So, which would mean about 25 years, all right? But I can't predict for a moment what it will be. I very much doubt there will ever be a popular will or vote to break up the United Kingdom. All right? Simple as that. Ewan?
On the university question, we have got ourselves into a position now where 50% of our young people have got an ambition to go to university, which is laudable and fine, so long as they have good careers coming out at the end of that. Now, I have to say, every barman I've met in Glasgow, Edinburgh's got a degree, and yet we're short of welders, right? And I went to Babcock to see the big construction yard with the Royal Danish Navy are wanting frigates to be made, and I was looking for Billy Connolly there with his blowtorch and his mask, and he wasn't there. I said, "Where's the welder?" And he said, "The chap at the corner there with a lab coat on a PC is welding to 1 to 100,000 position." I said, "What does he get paid?" £75,000. okay? And yet we've just brought in, because the SNP have cut funding to Fife College, we've just cut our welding school. We've just brought in 300 welders from the Philippines to work in Babcock. It's a national disgrace. We need to reorganise our young people around trades, around skills, around technical jobs, and yes, there's room for university in that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's go to Simon Johnson from The Telegraph.
Thank you. You've released your constituency candidates this afternoon for the election, Nigel, and they include a couple of former SNP people. What would you say to claims that you are soft on the union? And to Malcolm, well, it includes a couple of former SNP people, I'm just stating that as a matter of fact. And Malcolm, what is Reform's position on keeping SNP freebies like prescriptions and university tuition? Thanks.
Look, people can be something and change their minds, and we in Reform welcome sinners that repenteth.
So, on all the freebies, I said in my speech that in the last 10 years, SNP have created a welfare economy, and they had a mandate to do that. They had a mandate to do that, and that's how they chose to spend their money. And if you look at the spending departments in the last 10 years, the department that's got the highest spending per annum is welfare, 15% per annum, and one of the lowest spending departments is the police at 3% per annum, which tells you how choices have been made. So my view on this is we need to grow our economy. So when we talk about we're spending 120 and raising 90. Let's grow the 90, and then we will have more money to spend on all the things that people want for free.
Okay, we're going to keep going with a couple more. Dan Sanderson from The Times, Scotland.
Hi, thanks very much. We've heard today that Glasgow is a city of lawlessness and anarchy. I was just wondering if you could say a bit more about how Reform would restore order, and in particular the Scottish Police Federation has called for more access to guns for police officers and for them to be routinely equipped with tasers. Is that something you would support? Thanks.
So on Glasgow, as I said, I've been out on the main streets of Glasgow, and it's not a pretty sight. And the fact is we should not blame the police. They're underfunded, they're overstretched, and indeed that needs to be looked at. I think we have, as I say, we have a record amount of spending in Scotland, 120 billion. Do you know that in 25 years, when this Parliament started, the spending for Scotland was 34 billion. Today's 117 billion. On a compound annual growth rate, that is 5% growth per annum. That is not austerity. There has been no austerity in Scotland from Westminster. That is 5% annual growth in spending. It's just being spent in the wrong place. And we need to spend more on police, perhaps, and less on welfare.
I have to say, on the other side of the border, I feel very sorry for our police. They've got a hell of a tough job. They're being prioritised often into doing the wrong things. They're frustrated that the Crown Prosecution Service won't press anybody for shoplifting unless they've nicked more than 200 quid. They're facing increasing violence, and I personally believe, and I'll talk for England, not Scotland here, but I personally believe that police officers should all have tasers as a means of their own self-protection. I really, really do. Alistair Grant from The Scotsman.
Hi there, thanks very much. I think Malcolm Offord, you said the other day in an event that I think around 40% of Reform's Holyrood candidates had been members of the Conservative Party. Is that correct? Is that the position? And if so, how is that offering a fresh voice in Scottish politics? And just on the manifesto, there's lots of bold statements in it, perhaps lacking some key details. For example, it says, shut down the Quangos, return their powers to democratically elected ministers. Which Quangos would you like to shut down? There's roughly 130. That includes health boards.
So the presumption should be the presumption should be to shut them all to begin with until we find out which ones can justify their existence. Now here's the thing. There's a democratic deficit going on here now in Hollywood, where ministers are no longer accountable for key public services because they're shielded by quangos, okay? Now, there's 23,000 civil servants working in quangos, and there's 29,000 civil servants working in the civil service with a massive overlap. It is not unreasonable to say that we should bring those together, rationalise it, make it more accountable to Hollywood. I don't see that that is a very controversial thing to say.
I agree.
And as far as...
I'll deal with that. Well, I can't win, can I? I mean, I'm being attacked for former SNP people standing for us. Now I'm being criticised for former Conservatives standing for us. And if they've never stood for anybody else before, you'll say they're all inexperienced. I mean, what am I supposed to do? What I will say, though, seriously, what I will say, is it's not surprising that quite a few people who've battled hard inside the Conservative Party in Scotland to try and turn it round into sensible positions have given up the ghost. And if you want any election predictions, it will be that the Conservative Party in Scotland on May the 8th will be all but obliterated. And you know what? They thoroughly deserve it. I'll do one more, because I just can't. Craig Patton from the Press Association. That's the last one I can take, folks. I'm sorry, we're timed out. Last one.
Thanks very much. Just to follow up on Alistair's point, Malcolm, if the position is, and you said this last week as well in an event that I was at, if the position is to scrap every single quango and then make the decision on which ones you need, how do you think that all of these, however many thousand civil servants are going to come back? Why would you come back to work if you've just been laid off at a moment's notice for no reason whatsoever? And to Nigel, just on the situation around observances in Trafalgar Square, is your position that all sort of these mass religious observances should be banned?
Yes.
All of them, including Jewish mass observances, Catholic mass observances.
I've never seen
mass observances.
I've never seen Jewish services taking place in places of historic Christian worship or anywhere else. Look, we have to get this right. We can't stop individuals praying. We wouldn't want to stop individuals praying, but mass prayer is banned. Mass Muslim prayer is banned in many Muslim countries in the Middle East itself. So yes, we have to stop this kind of mass demonstration, provocative demonstration in historic British sites, because that's what it is.
Just briefly on the quangos, we've got 132 quangos costing £6.5 billion. The National Information Commissioner Hamilton has just said he doesn't know what they all do and what they're all doing. When you say they get back to work, will they come back to work? The question is, who's actually in the office anyway? I think we need to look at how we rationalise this in a professional way. And here's the thing, we're going to grow the private sector. We're going to go 2 million people who work in the private sector. We're going to make wages better in the private sector. And if there's dislocation in the public sector, there'll be good jobs to be had in the private sector instead.
Okay, can I ask all of the... I can't do any more questions. I know there were more. I've taken a lot. Can I ask all of the candidates that are standing for us in the Scottish Parliament to come and join Malcolm and myself on stage? Please. Get your copy. I've got a little plan for the end.
Yes. Very good.
Just us. Okay, spread round. They're coming in both sides. Very good. Well, I wanted you all to get a look at the men and women who are putting their heads up over the parapet. Some of them are sinners from the SNP, others from the Conservative Party, and some are complete political virgins. But either way, we're very, very grateful to all of you for doing this, and we are going to make, are we not, the most enormous noise up to May the 7th and do amazingly well. Very, very good. Right, well
Still coming up.
I know.
There's a lot of them.
I know a lot of them. So I want to say to all the delegates that have turned up today for this conference, there will be many, many meetings opened out to the public, as I've been doing in England for the last week. I will be back in Scotland many times during the month of April to support this campaign. I thank all of you for coming today. I thank you all for being part of the People's Army. Let's go do this, and thank you very much indeed.